Next up on the list here, Tera Smith was 16 years old and not pregnant in 98 when she vanished from Redding, California. Here's the other thing, too. Like, when they're saying that these people are not pregnant, do they know for sure? Like, if they had just recently taken a pregnancy test and maybe told somebody about it, like the father. Again, nothing to do with Scott Peterson or satanic cults. But if the father doesn't want to be a father, this is why pregnant women have a higher rate of being met with foul play because, there's scumbags out there. So just because it wasn't known that she was pregnant, I mean, a missing person with an unrecovered body, how can you tell with 100% certainty they weren't pregnant? But goofs like Quirky Motor will, of course, hallucinate to know for sure. But anyway, continuing on here, 98, she vanished from Redding, California, 250 miles north of Modesto. The blonde high schooler left her home one day to break up with her boyfriend, a married 29-year-old father. She never returned home and her body was never found. Tera's boyfriend was sentenced for statutory rape due to Tera's age, but he has never been charged with murder or disappearance. It is considered a closed case. Well, why would it be considered closed? And also, wouldn't it increase the likelihood if he's married and he doesn't want his family to find out and she told him he was pregnant? I mean, if indeed he admitted to the statutory rape, how would anybody other than them, if they're the only two that knew that she was pregnant, would know that she was pregnant? But again, goofs like Quirky Moto, they don't even have the mental capacity to just summon this children's level basic logic here. Let's go to NBCnews.com here. Family pushing for justice in 98 disappearance of daughter Tera Smith in Redding, California. The 16-year-old said she was going jogging and would be back in about 20 minutes. She never returned. By Veronica Fulton, April 17, 2022. Tera Smith loved life and, according to her family, lived it to the fullest. She had a lot of passions and interests. She loved horses. She loved basketball, nature. Tera's mother, Marilyn, told Dateline. Her freshman year of high school, she was homecoming queen and arm wrestling champ. It was evident by the end of 16 that Tera was extremely passionate about many things. She loved poetry. She had a deep spiritual side, Marilyn said. She was also a prolific writer. Tera's father, Terry, added, "We have volumes and volumes of her journals." Tera's younger sister, Kira, told Dateline that Tera was very outgoing. She was just always the star of, sports and everything like that, Kira said, always surrounded by a group of friends. She was also kind. She went out of her way, I think, to make everyone feel included, Kira added. The sisters were close in age, only about a year and a half apart, and Kira looked up to Tera as little sisters do. Of course, she would torment me like any big sister, Kira said with a laugh. The pair also had two younger siblings, Trevor and Sierra. According to Tera's parents, their children were all very close. I think all the other kids looked up to her as being the oldest, Marilyn said. She was very loving to her siblings. The Smith children grew up in Redding, California. I always liked growing up there, Kira told Dateline. We grew up boating and we would go skiing in the winter, and so I loved all the outdoor stuff there was to do there. Tera juggled it all, being the responsible firstborn, working at the family business, and being a good student at Central Valley High. She even took up Taekwondo. It was of interest to her because of the connection to the earth, Terry said. All that really appealed to her. But Tera was like any other teenager, and in August 98, she was grounded. I think she had snuck out, Marilyn remembered. She wasn't always the perfect child by any means. Marilyn recalled spending August 22nd running errands with Tera before dropping her off at their home in Redding. Tera's little sister Sierra was home at the time. Marilyn then headed to work just a few miles from home. My parents own a fun center. My brother actually owns it now, Kira told Dateline. It just has the mini golf and go-karts and bumper boats, all that kind of stuff. It's called the Oasis Fun Center, and Kira said that the whole family worked there. Tera and I would both run the counter and the laser tag, Kira said. That evening, August 22nd, 98, Tera was supposed to go to work at the Fun Center. Her shift started just about an hour after her mother, Marilyn's, did, but Tera never showed. Marilyn said she called the house and her youngest daughter, Sierra, answered the phone. Sierra was here at the home and said that she'd gone jogging and said she was only going to be gone for 20 minutes but didn't come back, Marilyn told Dateline. At that point, I came home and just drove all the roads and I thought she might be jogging on and I couldn't find her. Kira remembers that night. I was actually at my best friend's birthday party, she said. My parents actually called to have me come into work since she didn't show up. Understandably, Kira was frustrated, but she also told Dateline that Tera usually never missed work. It had never happened before, she said, so I was frustrated with her until it turned real. until we realized she might not be coming home. The Smiths started calling Tera's friends and an ex-boyfriend, but no one knew anything. Marilyn said she didn't call police at first because she thought Tera was just at a friend's house. But then Marilyn told Dateline one of Tera's friends later returned their call. I think she was having an inappropriate relationship with Troy Zink, Z-I-N-K, not C. Her Taekwondo instructor, Marilyn said, the friend revealed. So that's when the red flags went off. The Smiths contacted the police. Terry Smith told Dateline he and Marilyn went over to Zink's house that night to talk to him. This was probably around 9 at night. His wife told us that he wasn't home. Kira told Dateline that she had no knowledge of Tera having an inappropriate relationship with the 29-year-old Zink. I didn't have a clue, she said. I knew she looked up to him a lot, like idolized him. Kira added that she did think it was a little weird how Tera would sometimes talk about Zink. But she said, I just totally thought of it as a student-mentor relationship. Terry told Dateline that Zink called them back that night around 11 p.m., gave us the same story that he stuck to throughout, that he had picked up Tera, dropped her off about a mile and a half from our house, 2 miles, 3 miles from our house, Terry said, and then had gone up to a hill nearby called Hang Glider Hill. So he basically admitted to being the last known person to see her and give her a ride. Wow. Terry told Dateline that Zink had been up on Hang Glider Hill praying for 5 hours. Why would he be praying? With not much to go on, the Smiths looked through their daughter's belongings to see, unless, again, if he does that, like, all the time, okay. But if he never does that and only did that particular night after being the last known person to interact with her, I mean, that's kind of a red flag, is it not? With not much to go on, the Smiths looked through their daughter's belongings to see if they could learn anything that could help their search. That's when they found a letter that Tera had written to Troy Zink. Within the first couple days of her being missing, we were going through her things in her bedroom and found the letter, Terry told Dateline. She had written a long letter that we think she was going to mail him or give to him. Based on what they read in the letter, the Smiths believe that on the evening of August 22nd, Tera planned on telling Zink that their relationship was over. I think originally she had written it all out thinking she would either mail it in or give it to him in person, Terry said. And then she decided she would just tell him in person. The Smiths said that they later learned that Zink had a prior conviction for spousal rape in 92. According to court records, Zink denied the claims that he had forced his ex-wife to have sex with him at knife point. He claimed that he had sex with his ex-wife while telling her that he was going to kill himself. I mean, that's kind of weird too. Could that be considered coercive? Because, I mean, is he, like, obviously it's emotional blackmail, but, I mean, that's really weird because, wow, that's really messed up. So that's what he claimed. So he admitted minimum to that. That's a huge red flag. Because if he's openly admitting that, like, what is he not admitting? During the investigation into Tera's disappearance, officials found several old sporting rifles and shotguns stored in the attic of Zink's Taekwondo studio. As a felon, Zink was not allowed to have firearms on his property. He claimed the firearms belonged to his father, who rented space from him. Is that even true? According to court records, June 24th, 99, a jury found Zink guilty of possession of a firearm by a felon and was sentenced to 4 years. In 2001, Zink filed an appeal stating that his counsel was ineffective for not requesting a change of venue for his trial and that the jury was not impartial due to the negative attention brought to him by police, media, and family of Tera Smith during the investigation into her disappearance. His appeal was denied. Well, what does that have to do with possession of the firearms? Because either did he not admit, like, he admitted that his father is storing them there. Yeah, that's kind of weird. And legally, see, I'm actually not clear on the law there. Is a landlord legally responsible for what a tenant is keeping on said property? I mean, maybe that's a different law state to state. If anybody knows the answer to that, they can chime in here. Dateline spoke with Lieutenant Chris Edwards at the Shasta County Sheriff's Office about Zink. I know that he was interviewed, Lieutenant Edwards said. They did the due diligence and, investigated and interviewed people that were close to her, that knew her, and followed all those leads out. Nothing about the investigation led to Tera or an official suspect in her disappearance. Troy Zink denies any involvement in Tera's case. He told police that Tera had called him at work wanting to see him. He said she was standing at the end of her driveway when he arrived. She leaned into his window, and he said that Tera asked him for $2,000. He said he told her he didn't have that much money, but he said he told her he'd give her money if he knew what it was for. He said Tera got angry. Nevertheless, he said she asked him for a ride. He said he let Tera out on an old Oregon trail and she went jogging. While court documents say that Zink was questioned extensively by police, he was never officially considered a person of interest in Tera's disappearance. See, I wonder why, though, because obviously police, I'm sure they have information they haven't released, but if Zink's story is true, now again, if he's still alive, brain fingerprint scan, of course. Because if that's all true, because, I mean, there's no shortage of scumbags out there. If he really did let her off on the trail, so I'm assuming no one was around to corroborate that and nobody spotted her. But what if there was some kind of shady individual or criminal at the trail who saw her? I mean, she's obviously, a young, attractive female. She would be prime target for a lot of scumbags out there. And the other thing, if the $2,000 story is true, does that mean Tera was involved in something? And might have known some shady individuals? In which case, I mean, that should be explored. But if Zink made that all up, obviously, just to cast suspicion away from himself. Or maybe he didn't make it up. Maybe she was involved with other shady people, but he was still the one that harmed her. Again, let's not fall for any false dichotomies here like the goofs like to do. Terry told Dateline that the family felt like the Shasta County Sheriff's Office did take Tera's case seriously at first. At the time, we really felt satisfied that they were giving it their all, Terry said. They brought in cadaver dogs. We have a lake nearby. They nearly drained that lake. So, okay, I'm assuming, so if they checked the trail, did they verify that she really was at the trail? In which case, did Zink really drop her off? But then what happened after? Did he pick her up again and then something happened? Too soon, the family feels Tera's case went cold. We feel like they really gave it their all for probably 6 months to a year, and then it was an important case for another year or two, and since then it's been shelved. It's completely cold, stone cold. Marilyn told Dateline that she held out hope that her eldest daughter would return home for a long time. It never felt like we properly mourned or grieved her in some ways because for so many months we hoped she would come back, she said. It was a very gradual process realizing she was gone. Terry, on the other hand, felt like he knew Tera's fate within the first 48 hours of her disappearance. I think Marilyn held on to hope far longer than I did, he said. I was convinced that she was gone from almost the get-go. Wow. I mean, it's kind of hard to even go through this, obviously, because it's so tragic. But I mean, yeah, see, again, family members, like a lot of the time, the intuition will tell them whether they're gone or not. And of course, sometimes the intuition is true, sometimes it's not. And of course, like a lot of goofs like to pretend that intuition's all nonsense by just pointing to the times it was inaccurate and writing off the times it was accurate as purely coincidental. But obviously there could be more going on here, but yeah, it's just tough. It's tough. Kira and her other siblings did not participate in the searches for their sister. I really think my parents tried to just protect us from that, she told Dateline. When I was younger, I just didn't think about like all the ugliness in the world. You're more aware as an adult. As an adult, Kira moved out of Reading, got married, and now has children of her own. Now that I'm older and I'm more aware of things, I still very much try to focus on just her life and all the good, because I don't want to focus on the ugly details of her disappearance. So Kira did just that, decided to focus on the good. She reached out to Tera's loved ones and put together a binder full of memories of her sister. I just wanted a way for people to share their memories of her, Kira said, to hear how many lives she's touched. We have a full 3-ring binder of these stories that we wouldn't even be aware of had she not gone missing, Terry said, remembering his daughter. And they paint a picture of a 16-year-old girl who was well beyond her years in maturity in terms of being thoughtful and considerate. And while the focus is on Tera's life, not her absence, we want justice still, Kira said. We don't want someone capable of doing something like this out just living their lives. Nearly a quarter century later, they realize the odds are slim but not impossible. There are plenty of cold cases out there that may never be solved, Terry said. We just hang on to the hope that ours won't be one of those. When asked where the investigation stands, Lieutenant Edwards told Dateline, it's still an active open investigation through our agency and we're following up on the leads that we do get. So again, just quickly going back to the quirky motor goof, in their very disingenuous, completely dishonest, and flat-out goofy write-up, they're pretending the case is closed. Here we have a direct quote from law enforcement. It's still an active, open investigation, and they're still getting leads. When asked if there were any active search efforts to find Tera, Lieutenant Edwards replied, "Not at this time. There's not." At the time of her disappearance, Tera was 5'7", blonde hair. The 16-year-old weighed 135 pounds. So she's pretty big and athletic. Strong, athletic build. Tera's mother, Marilyn, said her daughter didn't have any scars or birthmarks. Tera would be 40 years old today. She just had a really good heart. Tera had a really good heart, Marilyn told Dateline. I think the world is a better place for her having been in it. Her father, Terry, added, and I can only imagine how much better it would be if she was still here. I mean, my other thought is her friends. What do her friends know? Because one of her friends was the one that told her parents about the possible relationship with Zink, although it seems like they must have known for sure. Well, maybe not, but I don't know. Teenage girls talk, so I'm assuming she told that friend, so the friend knew. What else did they know? And who else was around her that maybe was shady, or is this really just a case of a stranger abductor? A stranger abduction. And was this all verified, too? Because Zink is claiming that she called him at work on her cell phone. So did they verify that? It doesn't say whether that was verified. Also, on Redding.com, it stated that Zink refused to be questioned by investigators after his initial interview with sheriff's deputies. Shasta County Sheriff Sergeant John Hubbard said in 2008 that by 2008, hundreds and hundreds of tips have been investigated. None panned out. They need to just brain fingerprint scan Zink and all her friends. I mean, that would solve this quick. I mean, really. Here's a post from one of Tera's friends, August 1st, 2019, on the Web Sleuths forum. I came searching for this thread as a real-life friend of Tera Smith. Since I became aware of online sleuthing communities, I have hope for some resolution of her case. I attended Zink's felony weapons sentencing hearing at the Shasta County Courthouse, which was full of Tera's friends and family, wearing yellow ribbons. Zink's family also attended. Here are some details I know that were not mentioned. Zink's truck was detailed before it was searched. So hold on a second. So they did search his truck? Huh. That's kind of interesting. Zink was convicted of felony rape. My recollection is that it was spousal rape in the early 90s. A search warrant unrelated to Tera's case was carried out at Zink's place of business, where he had a number of firearms. He was then charged with felony possession. Zink's defense was that the weapons belonged to his father. Tera's fastidious journal keeping indicated a sexual relationship with Zink and her intention to end it. I am so confident Zink is responsible and can't understand how he was never charged. So a few details here. Updated from the Charlie Project, updated April 2022. So Tera was last seen leaving her family's residence, so nobody saw her on the trails. So she was going for a jog between 5 and 7 p.m. She wasn't allowed to leave the house at night on her own, and her sister tried to stop her, but Tera said she would be back before their parents got home. She has never returned home, has not been seen again. So according to Zink, Tera called him during the evening hours, asked him to meet her near her home at 6:30 p.m. That's kind of weird, though. It says that she was leaving between 5 and 7 p.m., so her sister doesn't know the exact time she left the house. I mean, I guess that's not... I mean, I don't know. People don't always look at the time every second, but... Zink claimed that Tera requested $2,000 from him during the meeting, but wouldn't say what for. He said he refused to give her the money. She became angry. She asked him to drop her off at the intersection of Old Alturas Road and Old Oregon Trail in Redding. He stated that he drove to Hang Glider Hill by himself to pray afterwards and returned to his house at approximately 11:30 p.m. So does he routinely go praying for all these hours? So he's got a wife and kid. And he works. He's a Taekwondo instructor. And so... what does this mean? So he's meeting her at 6:30. He drops her off, allegedly. Now, I would think Hang Glider Hill would be searched extensively, because why would he say he went to these... I mean, if she would, I mean, I don't know. This is rough. Is he thinking people might have seen him driving? Like, what? Was there really nobody out on the roads at this time? So nobody. I don't know. This is tough. Oh, here's another detail here. He has always denied his involvement with Tera's disappearance. He said that he received a letter from her, which allegedly stated she was planning to leave her home. Okay, so did he make that up and the $2,000 which she needed to leave home? Did he concoct that story to cover for himself? Or is the story true and someone else harmed her? Tera's family has maintained she was a typical teenager who had some problems with her life, but nothing that would have led her to run away. What problems? Okay, there's another detail here. There was an unconfirmed sighting of Tera on the evening of her disappearance in Reading. A witness told investigators that someone matching Tera's description was spotted inside a full-size dark blue 1976 Ford pickup with mag wheels and a yellow tailgate. The girl was accompanied by an unidentified Caucasian male. It has not been established if this sighting is related to Tera's case. Tera was a junior at Central Valley High at the time of her disappearance. She had 3 siblings. Her parents are still living in Reading. No arrests have been made, and the case remains unsolved. Okay, so there was a sighting. Possibly of her, maybe not her, but... Also, she was a homecoming queen. What's kind of weird, why did Zink admit to going to the house? Is it because he really did? Because her sister, Sierra... said, I remember watching her as she jogged out of my line of sight. Was that inside the home or outside the home? So did she see Tera jog down the street? So she did not see Zink pull into the driveway or even onto the street? So why did Zink say that if it wasn't true? It also says they met up near her home, so not right at the home? I don't know, that's kind of weird. Also, what kind of truck did Zink have? I'm assuming here, unidentified Caucasian male. Was this not Zink? The other thing that's weird, of course, is the timeline, because if Zink dropped her off at about 6:30 p.m., the intersection of Old Alturas Road and Old Oregon Trail, that's an hour. That's too far. So she needs to start her shift at 7. So that does not allow, that's not enough time to start her shift. So what does that mean? So Zink apparently had a black truck, not a blue 76 Ford pickup. He had a black truck. Nobody spotted his truck. Nobody was able to corroborate his story. Where he was or where he claimed to be or if he was elsewhere. I mean, apparently nobody had seen him in that period of time at all anywhere. So supposedly the day after her disappearance, he got new tires and detailed the truck. The old tires were never located. He also never told the police where he got the work done to detail and get the new tires. And apparently the police never tracked that down. I mean, this is insane. So from a local here on Reddit, Unresolved Mysteries, Art Before Words, this is all info from this individual. All of us in the area are 1,000% sure he killed her and dumped her body into one of the many mine shafts on his father's property. Both of these men should have been charged. His dad was a creep and scammer too with his coin shop. Many people felt the father knew exactly what happened. Charles Troy Zink was later arrested for dumping kittens in Tehama County and charged and served time. Wow, so he's dumping kittens now too? This is crazy. Wow, that's a lot of weird information there. This individual also said there is no doubt by many in law enforcement that he was the killer. She might have told him she was going to rat him out for having sex with 16-year-olds. Anyway, he was already a rapist, so he killed her and got away with it. There has never once been another suspect. I hope he rots in hell. Wait a second. So apparently Tera's friends also went to the Taekwondo school. So did Tera know that he was having relationships with other students also? Is that true? And why have the other students not come forward if that is true? Because that would definitely be motive there. What are these problems that her family said that she's having? Because this is also the Saturday right before school starts. So this is not an arbitrary date in the middle of the summer. So apparently his property was searched and the place where he said he meditated was searched, as well as areas in between there and the trail. But I believe, so here, from everything I've seen, they never searched his father's house or property. Another poster posted, Amador9 posted that Zink was on parole for illegal sex with a 15-year-old girl. And had his relationship with Tera come out, he would be on his way back to prison for a long time. He also denied any inappropriate relationship with Tera. So he thought it'd be... So is it perfectly normal that a random 29-year-old is going to be giving rides to a 16-year-old girl at her whim? The phrasing here is interesting, too. The story he told police was very strange. He denied any inappropriate relationship with Tera, claimed she asked him for $2,000 and got mad when he refused, took her to a specific remote location where she wanted to go, where she did not appear to have any reason to be. And that is curious. Did she ever jog there before? Or was this the first time ever she wanted to be dropped off there? And he went off to a very remote area to pray. The police were baffled by the bizarre story that was hardly self-serving. The detail about the 2000 seems so off the wall, there must be some significance. Very likely, Troy knew that there may be some evidence that Tera had some expectation that he would give her $2,000, and possible witness sightings of him with her that evening. He probably needed to cover that in his story. According to all the write-ups on the case I have found, the writings that her father had found indicated that Tera was in a sexual relationship with Zink, but she had decided that it was wrong, so she was going to confront him and break it off. I have no idea if this is accurate or if this is a sanitized account intended to protect the reputation of someone who is clearly a victim. Obviously, $2,000 doesn't really seem to fit into the scenario. It might fit if Tera was pregnant and the money was for an abortion. This, however, would be speculation, since it has never been acknowledged by anyone connected to the case. While it is possible that Troy killed her because he was mad she was breaking up with him, it seems more likely that he feared another sex with a minor charge that would land him in prison for a long time. It could be that she was refusing to have an abortion or otherwise planning some action that would get him in trouble. It is even possible that he killed her to save himself the $2,000. There is another 16-year-old girl, a friend of Tara's, whose existence has been mentioned in many accounts but has never been identified. Her role in the matter is rather vague. It has been suggested that she may have been having sex with Zink or just a confidant of Tera who had information about her relationship with Zink. Whatever the case, Zink has not been charged with illegal sexual activity with her. Redding is a town of 100,000 people. Well, how did nobody else see them that night? This is weird. Both the fathers of Zink and Tera are somewhat well-known, and this whole situation is well-known. 20 years later, people still talk about it and take sides? Wow, seriously? People are taking Zink's side on this? I heard that Zink returned to Redding when he got out of prison. If he is still there, he has kept a low profile. Other people are saying that he doesn't currently live in Redding. He's been moving. He moved around a lot the past 20 years. Again, I have no idea if that's true or not. Others said that he actually changed his name and his son changed his name as well. Some more curiosities by online research here. So supposedly the area where Zink said he went to pray is actually closed on weekends. Obviously, he could still have snuck in, but that's weird. Also, if she was really having some kind of a problem, so this is the Saturday, this is the weekend before school starts. So was there some other kind of an issue where she really did want to run away? And then something happened to her? Possibly even that same night? Alright, we're about to get into MINDSHOCK land. I didn't think I'd be spending this much time on this case, but there's a lot here, actually. So someone claimed, I don't know, this was on a YouTube comment on a news story of Tera. There's no link here, but this is on the Web Sleuths forum. Someone said that law enforcement did not interview a friend of hers, Jenny. Jenny apparently saw Tera running away from Troy Zink the day she disappeared. YouTube comments can be taken with a grain of salt, but it does make me wonder just how much of a missed opportunity law enforcement had to get this guy. And what if this guy is some kind of a scumbag and she did run away from him only to meet her fate at the hands of another scumbag? And we're going to get into some truly mind-shocking territory in a moment here on the area that allegedly she wanted to be dropped off, according to Zink, which I don't know if that's true at all after seeing some of this stuff. So the intersection where Zink says he dropped Tera off is of interest. I hope law enforcement have knocked on all doors up and down that area. So who's ready for a huge mind shock? So Sherri Papini, this was supposedly some kind of kidnapping hoax. So Sherri Papini was actually Tera Smith's classmate. So let's look at this. I mean, again, this is just absolutely insane and mind-shocking. I don't know if anybody actually requested the Tera Smith case on MindShock. Maybe they did. I've gotten so much requests. I write them all down and add them to the list. So I'll be covering them. But this is crazy. This is an article from krcrtv.com by Dylan Brown, March 18, 2022. The Papini arrest opens up old wounds for family of missing North State woman. Shasta County. Sherri Papini's arrest has sparked frustration for one North State family as their search for Tera Smith continues for its 24th year. I would love to say that it's not upsetting and just to be able to have so much compassion, but I can't because it's so upsetting, said Sierra Smith, sister of longtime missing Reading girl Tera Smith. Tera was a 16-year-old Central Valley High student who disappeared from her family's home on Tarcy Way in 98 after officials say she went for an evening jog and never returned. Our parents told us never to leave the house at night on our own. I was like, Tera, you're not allowed to go, Sierra said. She told me that she would be back before her parents ever got home. I remember watching her as she jogged out of my line of sight. But wasn't she supposed to start work? Sierra said the then 29-year-old Troy Zink was dating Tera at the time and was her former martial arts instructor. Former? Wait a second, so she was no longer doing Taekwondo at the time? She said the family believes he had something to do with this, but officials have never named Zink as an official suspect. His name is still hard to hear in our house, Sierra said. Tera remains missing to this day. When officials in Shasta County announced Sherri Papini's disappearance in 2016, Sierra said that the Papini family asked Terry Smith, Tera's father, for advice. After Sherri was found 22 days later, Sierra said the Papini family visited their house several times. My sister Kira spoke to Sherri after she was found, Sierra said. She had dinner at my parents' house. Sierra said it was frustrating to find out that Papini had been lying about her kidnapping. I just have to tell myself that she's sick, Sierra said. Like, she has to be sick to have come up with that story and to hurt herself the way she did. She's just not well. Officials continue the search for Tera, and her photo and info still remain on the California Department of Justice's website under missing persons. I remember one day I had forgotten what Tera's voice sounded like, and that's just so sad, Sierra said. We know someday we will see her again in heaven, and that's what we have to hold on to. That's almost what I would want to happen at this point instead of finding something I wouldn't want to see or know. Sierra said she looked up to her sister when she was little and that Tera was always full of joy and kindness. She was my person, the one I looked up to, Sierra said. Let's go in order here, though. So this is a People.com article by Diane Herbst, published December 9, 2016. What happened to Sherri Papini's schoolmate who also vanished in the same city 18 years ago? On August 22nd, 98, Tera Smith, then 16, and the high school homecoming queen of the freshman class, left home in Redding, California, dressed to go jogging. She was never seen again. Sherri Papini, a mom of two and a former schoolmate of Tera's who disappeared 18 years later during a jog. So not only is this whole thing supposedly a hoax, but she also claims she got kidnapped while jogging. So 2.5 miles from where Tera vanished had a luckier outcome. She was found alive, but beaten and chained on Thanksgiving morning following an apparent abduction. So was this some kind of liar situation where she beat herself up, or did other people beat her up? Papini's case continues to baffle investigators and it bears some seemingly baffling similarities to Smith's case, though Shasta County Sheriff Tom Bosanko tells People investigators have not developed any evidence that the two cases are linked. Still, several days after Papini disappeared, her husband, Keith Papini, reached out to Smith's father for advice. Keith came to me and we spoke for about an hour, Terry Smith tells People. I just told him to stay strong for his kids and not assume law enforcement has the answers and to push them. It was obvious Keith was torn up, Terry says, and I believe he was confident he'd get his wife back. I mean, obviously this is a different situation than, a 30-some-year-old versus a 16-year-old going missing, but Sherri's case brought back some very vivid memories, and our hearts went out to Keith and his kids, Terry says. We know how it feels, that hopelessness and having nothing to go on is familiar. Tera's sister, Kira, who was in the same grade as Sherri. Tera was a year older. When Sherri was found, the Smiths were elated. Terry says, I can't tell you how thrilled we were. It's bittersweet. We didn't have that kind of outcome. Despite the strange surface similarities between Tera's and Sherri's disappearances, there are notable differences, Terry says. While authorities are still piecing together why and by whom Sherri was abducted, Tera's case is not so mysterious. Terry claims he knows who is responsible for his daughter's vanishing, a man who has never been charged and denies involvement but who remains a person of interest. And, of course, this is Zink. And the People article is actually stating that Tera was scheduled to work at 6 p.m., not 7 p.m., which is even weirder. Terry stated this, that Zink wasn't... So Terry says he was told during the search by one of Tera's friends that his daughter was romantically involved with Zink. So not a suspicion. It seems like it was a definitive statement. That night he went to Zink's house. Terry says Zink wasn't there and he didn't show up until 11:30 p.m. Zink is an avid four-wheeler guy. He knows the back roads. He had 5.5 hours to get rid of evidence, and he's been smart enough to keep his mouth shut, Terry says. There might be some funny business going on with police here because Sheriff Bosanko stated that thousands of tips were called in. Not one person saw her on the busy road, but supposedly there were one or two sightings, unconfirmed, but at least people said they saw her, supposedly. So let's look at Sacramento Bee, July 28th, 2022. Hoodwinked. Sherri Papini's kidnapping hoax ends with arrest outside her kids' piano lessons. Actually, let's go to LA Times. Sherri Papini's family, appalled by arrest in alleged fake abduction, says she was ambushed in front of her kids. Don Thompson, March 4, 2022. The family of a North California woman whose 2016 disappearance triggered an intensive search and international headlines on Friday criticized the way she was arrested on charges that she faked her own kidnapping. Sherri Papini, 39, of Redding, was ambushed in front of her children Thursday afternoon, according to her family. She spent the night in Sacramento County Jail on charges of mail fraud and lying to a federal agent. At a Friday afternoon court appearance, she was ordered detained as a danger and flight risk. Papini disappeared while jogging in 2016. She turned up 3 weeks later on Thanksgiving Day alongside a highway 150 miles from her home. She had a brand on her right shoulder along with burns and bruises on her body. Wait a second. Was this actually a real kidnapping? And the police are trying to cover it up because it has something to do with corrupt police, which we'll actually get to in the Tera Smith case in a moment. I mean, this is all really insane. She described her abduction at gunpoint and abusive treatment by two Hispanic women to police in great detail, triggering a hunt for her abductors. It was all a lie, authorities said Thursday. She actually was with a former boyfriend in Orange County, they said, and beat herself up to support her fabrication. So she beat herself up like liar, liar style? Like what? This is a weird case. Her family's statement did not address the veracity of the charges, but said the family is confused by several aspects of the counts. They also criticized how she was taken into custody. We love Sherri and are appalled by the way in which law enforcement ambushed her afternoon in a dramatic and unnecessary manner in front of her children, the family said in the statement released through a publicist. She would have come to the police station if asked, the family said, where this could have been handled in a more appropriate way. I mean, that's a good point. Papini and her husband, Keith, have cooperated with investigators' requests, the family said, despite repeated attempts to unnecessarily pit them against each other, empty threats to publicly embarrass them, and other conduct that was less than professional. Her attorney, Michael Borges, did not immediately respond to telephone and email messages seeking comment after her court appearance Friday. Papini is due back in court Tuesday for a hearing to determine whether she can be released from custody. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office in Sacramento declined to comment, while the Shasta County Sheriff's Office did not immediately comment, but previously said it would have nothing more to say now that charges have been filed. All three agencies investigated the case. Papini is charged with lying to a federal agent as recently as August 2020 when authorities said they confronted her with evidence that she had made up her story and warned her that lying to federal enforcement officials is a crime. The mail fraud charges relate to the more than $30,000 she collected from the California Victim Compensation Board, including therapy for anxiety and PTSD, according to the court filing. It carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison, while lying to a federal officer has a maximum of 5-year sentence. A 55-page court affidavit supporting her charges say a GoFundMe campaign raised more than $49,000 to help the family. No charges are related to that money, which investigators say the couple used to pay off bills and for other expenses. So apparently she was sentenced to 18 months in prison. So what's weird though, it was 5 years. So since she turned up, 5 years passed before these allegations that it was all a lie in the arrest. So her husband apparently spent those 5 years really thinking that she was legitimately kidnapped. I mean, if she was, how are people, like, what is the definitive evidence that she wasn't? I mean, I don't know. Apparently she also owes $300,000 in restitution. Now, people commenting on the case, they were also stating that they never believed her even before all of this came out. I don't know. That's kind of weird. Mel posted, "At first I believed her because of how bad her injuries were, including the branding. I don't think anyone would do that to themselves. Then when it got to the details of her captivity, I started to get suspicious because of how sensationalist it seemed, and then it mentioned the annoying Mexican music I knew for sure." I mean, I don't want to go too far into this case because there is quite a bit of information here. And she did plead guilty, and she admitted that she faked her kidnapping, which is interesting. Now, if it was real, I'm sure they kind of told her, like, if she really felt that she would not have been believed and facing however many years in prison, would she admit it just to get the lesser sentence? I mean, obviously people do that all the time. Again, I'm not alleging that it was or wasn't real. Obviously, I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of issues here. So she was a classmate or 1 or 2 years off, a year off from Tera. Like, from Tera Smith, and she also alleging to have gone missing while jogging. Now, we're going to get into... I'll read a few excerpts here from the Sacramento Bee. Hoodwinked, Sherri Papini kidnapping. This is before she admitted it. So days before, Papini, chains around her wrists and waist, her voice hoarse from screaming, flagged down a motorist along a darkened road north of Sacramento. She told detectives she'd spent 22 days locked in a room, a bucket filled with kitty litter for a toilet. Her captors, she said, were 2 Latino women who kidnapped her at gunpoint while she was on a jog near her home north of Redding. They beat her. They branded her shoulder as if she was livestock. They told her she was going to be sold as a slave to a cop. Then, inexplicably, they let the 34-year-old mom go. Now, here she sat safely on a living room couch, the invited guest of MacArthur, the then mayor of Redding. Papini's husband, Keith, did most of the talking, MacArthur recalled, while his wife sat hunched over, gaze locked on the floor. Inside that living room, MacArthur, a former physician's assistant who worked in hospital emergency rooms, saw a woman still cowering in fear of her tormentors. This was part of my wheelhouse, to see people traumatized by things. You can't work in an ER for years and not see it, MacArthur recalled 5.5 years later, sitting in the same living room. So I just believed it. I believed it, and she certainly appeared to have signs of PTSD. But it was all a lie. The world now knows that the 2 women never existed after Papini pled guilty this spring to lying to FBI agents. See, this isn't enough information to convince me that this didn't happen just because someone said so. Like, where's the hard evidence? Her 3 weeks in captivity in November 2016 were spent in Southern California in an apartment with an ex-boyfriend, James Reyes. At Papini's request, FBI agents said he branded her shoulder with a wood-burning tool. He hit her with a hockey puck, and he held up a hockey stick so that Papini could ram her face into it and break her own nose. So is that where he drew the line? That he'll brand her and he'll hit her with a puck, but he won't break her nose. If she wants to break her nose, he'll only hold the stick and she has to run into it. Is that how their relationship worked? Papini, through her attorney, Bill Portanova, declined to comment for this story. Portanova also declined comment. More than a mere tabloid tale that once captivated the nation, Papini's story is one of a community that went from heartbroken to hoodwinked. What follows is the most comprehensive retelling of the story of Papini's disappearance, her reemergence, and the web of people victimized by her lies. It is the culmination of hours of interviews Sacramento Bee reporters Ryan Sabalow and Sam Stanton conducted over the years, both before and after her arrest, and a review of court filings, public records, 911 calls, and court testimony. The Bee and its attorneys also successfully petitioned the Shasta County Superior Court to unseal 17 search warrants the detectives had obtained in the case. Those warrants provide previously unreported details that appear in this three-part story. So, okay. So do they have hard evidence, witnesses, security footage that she really was in this apartment with her boyfriend? The disappearance. The last text message Keith Papini received from his wife, November 2nd, 2016, urged him to come home for lunch so that they could have sex. He wasn't able to sneak away from work, but when he got home that evening, the house was empty. It made him nervous since the kids never came home either, and Sherri didn't return his calls. He used the cell phone locator app and found her phone near the edge of their driveway. Their wedding song, Michael Bublé's Everything, was playing on repeat through the phone's earbuds. He called 911. Dispatcher, hello? Can I help you? Keith, I just got home from work and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went for a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up. So I got freaked out, so I hit the Find My iPhone app thing, and it showed her phone like at the end of our driveway. I'm totally freaking out thinking that somebody grabbed her. Dispatcher, when's the last time you heard from her? She sent me a text asking me if I was coming home from lunch. Dispatcher, what time were the kids supposed to be picked up? Way before 5:30. She usually goes like 4:30, 4:45. Dispatcher, okay, are you headed back to the house or where are you right now? I'm at the end of the driveway. I'm at Old Oregon Trail and Sunrise where they meet because that's right where I found her phone on the ground. That's telling me that something happened to her. Then there's like hair in the headphones like they got ripped off. In the days that followed, Keith Papini took a lie detector test to prove he wasn't involved in her abduction. Sheriff's deputies with tracking dogs and volunteers walked grid patterns pushing through Poison Oak in the brushy foothills surrounding the neighborhood where Sherri disappeared. A local company printed hundreds of signs featuring Sherri Papini's face and the number for the sheriff's office. They soon hung from power poles and fences around town. At the intersection, and she kind of sort of looks like Tera Smith as well. I mean, obviously older. At the intersection where she went missing, a trio of balloons hung from barbed wire fence "Bring Sherri Home" was written on them in black marker. Papini's family reached out to media outlets. It wasn't particularly hard sell for a news industry that's increasingly facing criticism for overhyping stories about missing attractive white women while paying scant attention to other missing persons cases. When she was younger, Papini had been an account exec for AT&T for several years, covering several stores. After she was laid off due to corporate downsizing, she embraced motherhood. She became a stay-at-home mom who homeschooled her children. Her family told reporters she was deeply devoted to her family and would do anything for her children. Headlines and articles declared Papini a super mom. I actually still can't get over how similar she looks to Tera Smith. I mean, even their high school photos look similar. I mean, they look the same. They allegedly vanished from the same road. They go to the same school. I mean, this is weird. It's also curious, did she also take Taekwondo lessons? I mean, this is just really, really weird. But back to the article here. Her family shared a number of photos of Papini with news outlets in the hopes someone would recognize her. There were plenty of photos to choose from. Sherri with her children, Sherri with her husband, Sherri smiling as she posed for a picture in front of Shasta Dam. But one photo would get widely shared by the tabloids and the likes of People magazine in the weeks and years ahead. An image of Papin's striking blue eyes looking directly into the camera. Keith appears to lean in to kiss her neck. Meanwhile, donations poured into the GoFundMe account, and a self-proclaimed hostage negotiator and an anonymous donor became involved. A ransom and rewards totaling at least $100,000 were offered. On November 15th, almost 2 weeks after her disappearance, Keith Papini and Sherri's sister Sheila Coaster appeared at a Reading City Council meeting begging for help. "I'm just trying to do everything I can to get her face everywhere, her name out to everybody," Keith Papini told the council. They asked the council to allow them to release balloons in her honor. "We will make that happen for you," then Mayor MacArthur replied, "and our prayers are with you." But hopes that Papini would be reunited with her family began to fade as the days dragged on and the helium in the balloons began to sag. Her case brought back horrifying memories of other women who were abducted, went missing, or were murdered in Shasta County over the years. There was serial killer Darrell Keith Rich, the hilltop rapist who murdered 3 women and an 11-year-old girl in Reading in 1978. He was executed in 2000. In 97, Christine Monroe, a 37-year-old nurse with blonde hair, was found dead along the river trail where she'd gone for a jog. Wait, what is it with these... What is it with this MO? Blondes that go jogging? And this is 97. This is only a year before Tera Smith. I mean, obviously the age, but I mean, this is crazy. And she was found dead along the river trail where she'd gone for a jog. She'd been stabbed over and over. At the time Papini was missing, no suspects had been identified. Due to a DNA hit, her killer, James Earl Watkins, pled guilty to her murder in 2021 to Christine Monroe's murder. And there was the 98. See, the problem for anybody that's studying all these true crime cases, a big problem that occurs is you really can't trust law enforcement or the court system. Because how often do they get it wrong? Now, and that's a multi-prong issue, because in certain cases they're actively framing people that they know are innocent or guilty of other crimes, but not this particular crime that they're accusing them of. But they frame them anyway, either to cover up for one of their own or someone connected with them, or just simply to close the book and not have to honestly investigate and do all that work, or they possibly coerce someone who they think is guilty, but maybe they're not. And then there's all these wrongful confessions. So can we even really trust this? But supposedly the DNA hit matched and he pled guilty. And again, sometimes people plead guilty just for the lesser sentence, not because they're actually guilty. And opening up the can of worms with DNA issues, because obviously every generation of DNA technology is touted as incredibly accurate until the new one comes around and they're like, oh, okay, I guess the previous one wasn't accurate. But for some reason, all these clueless goofs hallucinate that whatever the current generation tech is, somehow it's magically accurate and super accurate, even though the other ones weren't. And then no matter how many times history repeats, no matter how many times the innocent are exonerated due to supposedly matching DNA evidence, these clueless goofs still religiously worship these DNA matches, so-called matches. And I'm not saying that they're not matches. Obviously, it's good tech. It's legit technology for the most part, but that doesn't mean it's 100%. And that's where the goofs really go haywire, where they can't comprehend that. But if we take it at face value, then that means James Earl Watkins was responsible for Christine Monroe, yet another blonde who went jogging and ended up dead. But there was a body here, so, Now, on krcrtv.com, it's actually stating that Christine Monroe was a 1995 cold case, not 97. Is that an error on the Sacramento Bee website? According to case documents, Christine Monroe was attacked while jogging on the south side of the Sacramento River Trail June 24th, 95. And these are all occurring in the summer? Like, I mean, is this too much coincidence for people? Not one, not two, but three. And again, I'm not saying it was the same person responsible. Isn't it kind of weird? Because contrary to popular belief, there are non-blondes in California. There's plenty of brunettes in California. Not every single female is blonde. Also, not every single blonde goes jogging in California. And certainly not in this exact area. So apparently the fingernail scrapings were resubmitted for DNA evidence January 2020. And there was a possible match on James Watkins, 42, of Texas. At the time, Watkins was serving a 14-year sentence for robbery in Texas State Prison. There was a search warrant issued for Watkins' DNA. Within a few weeks of their return and submission of Watkins' DNA, they learned that the CODIS hit was a match. Watkins' DNA was under Christine Monroe's fingernails at the time of her murder. D.A. Bridget said that Watkins waived all of his rights to appeal. He will receive 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. And what are all the details of that? Did he do that to not face the death penalty? And is there any other evidence? Like, did they confirm that he was in the area even? Because if he was in Texas the whole time, I mean, that might be a dodgy DNA hit. Like, were his whereabouts accounted for? Yeah, this is tough. But continuing on here, and there was the 98 disappearance of Tera Smith, 16-year-old blonde who went to high school with Papini. The last person to have seen her said she went out for a jog on Old Oregon Trail, the same road where Papini later vanished. Smith's body was never found. No arrests were made. Less than a week after Papini went missing, Keith Papini spoke with Tera Smith's father. Terry asked him for advice. He had little to offer other than to doggedly insist detectives throw everything they have at the case and to not give up. But Terry Smith told a B reporter a few days before Papini showed back up that he wasn't optimistic. In the Papini case, they've got nothing at all, Terry Smith said. I didn't have a lot of comfort to offer him. I'm not real confident that anything's going to come out of it. How do you tell somebody 5 days after their wife's gone missing that she's probably gone for good? Suspect number 1 in Papini abduction. While Sherri Papini was missing, detectives were aggressively pursuing leads. For a time, they even thought they had their abductor, Donovan Misk, a healthcare consultant from Michigan. According to the search warrants the Bee had unsealed, Papini's deleted text messages revealed that she'd been texting with Misk as recently as the week before she disappeared, November 2nd. Misk met Papini in 2011, according to a statement to detectives, when she was in Michigan for a conference. Misk told the Bee he didn't know she was married, though she'd been with her husband Keith for 2 years at that point. She appeared to be an exceptional individual, he said. Obviously, she was drop-dead gorgeous, and everyone that met her was enamored by her. She was really pretty magical, as I recall. Even so, he said the relationship faded over the years. The two gradually stopped speaking. She messaged him out of the blue in 2016, presumably when she saw from his social media accounts that he was in San Fran for work, Miske said. I'm in a conference from 9 to 5. How far of a drive? Where would we meet? Miske texted her on October 29th, according to the search warrants. She replied that she was 4 to 5 hours away. Yikes, he wrote. Her messages quickly grew uncomfortable, frequent, frantic, and cryptic. Misk said one of Papini's messages was to the effect of, quote, if we don't meet now, we may never meet again, end quote. I thought to myself, I'm not meeting up with this person. It sounds like too much hassle, too weird. The distance and Papini's odd texts prevented a rendezvous, but their messages did persuade 2 Shasta County detectives to travel halfway across the country to pay Misk a visit. They, along with U.S. Marshals and Michigan police officers, showed up unexpectedly at his client's office and began asking him questions. Did I have a party and someone leave drugs at my house? Misk remembered thinking. Did I accidentally hit someone when I was driving my car? Was there some embezzlement case where I was pinged for it? Was I trying to go through all the possibilities and it seemed extremely serious? Like I had committed a very heinous crime. They acted like I might have, a bunch of guns and people held up in cages at my house or something. He was able to show from his cell phone tracking data as well as pictures from his San Francisco trip that proved he wasn't anywhere near Shasta County when she disappeared. The detectives also searched Misk's apartment while he was at work. Sherri Papini wasn't there. They claimed my door was open, Misk said, though he swears the place had been... Wait, so they didn't have a warrant? This is insane. And yet detectives refused to even search Zink's father's place. Normally, I'd be very frustrated about that, Misk said, but it probably helped me that they searched me at random, and I passed with flying colors. Captain Brian Jackson of the Shasta County Sheriff's Office said Misk was their primary lead while Papini was missing. It was a major disappointment to have to make the call to the top brass in Shasta County and tell them their would-be suspect had a rock-solid alibi. I mean, he said that was a huge letdown. With no suspect and no real lead on Papini's whereabouts, the situation seemed beyond bleak. But then it happened, the moment the Shasta County Sheriff's Office would call an absolute miracle. Allison Sutton was driving northbound on Interstate 5 just before 4:40 a.m. She was with her daughter Michelle on their way from Southern California to visit relatives for Thanksgiving on the North Coast. Bleary-eyed and tired after driving nonstop along the flatlands of California's Central Valley, Sutton was jolted by the sight of a woman practically standing in traffic. She had a piece of fabric, I don't know what it was, but she had this piece of fabric that she was waving as she tried to flag somebody down. She had this kind of wild-eyed, frantic, desperate look in her eyes. It's the look in her eyes that, stuck with me. Sutton pulled over and called 911. A truck driver who also spotted Sherri Papini would pull over and wait with her until a California Highway Patrol officer arrived. The officer immediately radioed for help from the Yolo County deputies. Wow, that's an interesting county, Yolo County. Wow, I wonder what kind of things go on in Yolo County. The officer urged them to go to Code 3, police dispatch logo for turning on lights and sirens and speeding to a location as quickly as possible. Papini's long blonde hair was cut short. She had a swollen nose. She'd lost nearly 10 pounds, a substantial amount for a woman who barely tipped the scales at 100 when she'd gone missing. So if this is all fake, I mean, she was pretty dedicated to this. I mean, wow, she starved herself, beat the crap out of herself. Wow. I mean, wait, and this is after the release of Liar Liar. A series of medical exams at a Woodland hospital found no evidence of sexual assault, though there were plenty of other signs of trauma. She had bruises on her face, rashes on her left arm and left upper inner thigh, as well as other parts of her body, ligature marks on her wrists and ankles, burns on her left forearm, and bruising on her pelvis and the front of both legs, the FBI would later write in their criminal complaint. You know what's curious, too? Like in the Jeffrey McDonald case where he barely had a scratch on him, I mean, supposedly one careful puncture, collapsed lung, whatever, and he's a doctor, so he could have easily done that. But he didn't even punch himself in the face a couple times. I mean, this woman is allegedly running into hockey sticks and getting beaten senseless with a hockey puck, and all these ligature marks and all of this, and Jeffrey McDonald couldn't even smash his face through like some glass or a window or a mirror or throw himself through some bookshelves. I mean, you know, it's kind of weird for the people that think he's guilty. She had been branded on her right shoulder, though the FBI wrote it wasn't clear what the brand said. Agents wrote the markings were indistinguishable. Papini would later tell a detective she thought the markings appeared to be from the biblical book of Exodus. The heck? It's a really confusing Bible passage, she told them. It's like a really weird part of the Bible. It doesn't make any sense. But why would she think that the markings would be from that? Wow. I mean, okay. At first, though, Papini refused to talk to detectives, so they gave an audio recorder to her husband, who asked her questions in the hospital and during an ambulance ride to another medical center. Papini described how, while out jogging, two women abducted her at gunpoint and forced her into a dark-colored SUV. She saw that they had masks on before they wrapped something around her head to block her vision. She said she was groggy during the drive. She said she might have been hit with a stun gun or drugged. I don't remember a lot, she told her husband. I'm missing time. The car smelled really bad, like sewage. She stuck me with something. I kept falling asleep. In that interview, and in others that would follow, with detectives, she described her abductors playing mariachi music while she was in the SUV. Wow. When they arrived at their destination, she said they kept her chained in a small room. She was only unchained when they let her out to bathe. She wore either an adult diaper or used a bucket with kitty litter for a toilet. That's kind of a weird thing, though. Like, how is it both? So they switched her from a diaper to the bucket back and forth? Does anybody else find this kind of weird? Her diet consisted of stale bread, beans, tortillas, leftover meat, and apples. She said she was beaten when she looked at her captors. Papini was given the opportunity to take 2 showers during her 22-day captivity. She described taking the first shower at gunpoint under the supervision of both women. She tried to engage the women. Where am I? Why am I here? Papini asked. Eventually, Papini described one of her captors saying, "We sell you," and the other one adding, "Your buyer is a cop." All right, this doesn't really make a lot of sense because why would they? Okay, maybe they would say, "We're going to sell you." Why would they tell her who the buyer was? See, the fact that they said it was a cop, this is where it's going to get crazy in a moment because, yeah, we're going firmly into MINDSHOCK land. When the younger woman got distracted by a comment from the older woman and lowered her gun, Papini said she slammed the younger woman's head into a toilet. The women grabbed Papini. Wait, so there was a toilet and they didn't let her use it? Okay, so if this was a different area, though, so they kept her in a tiny cell with kitty litter or whatever, and then they let her bathe twice in, I guess, the main area. The women grabbed Papini and dragged her back into the bedroom by her hair. They forced her to drink a bitter substance, then locked the door. Papini also claimed to have fought back at other times. "I tried to get out the first time, and that's when she branded me," she told her husband in the initial recorded interview. She described how her abductors brought a table in, hit her back, and tied her down. When they branded her, she said her skin made a sizzling, popping sound. She offered limited descriptions of her captors, saying they wore face coverings, including different colored bandanas and lace masks. One of the women, she said, had thin eyebrows and pierced ears. Her hair was long and curly. The other one, who was older, had straight black hair and thick eyebrows. Sherri told Keith one of the women, who she said otherwise spoke Spanish most of the time, read her articles in English that had raised questions about whether Papini had been abducted. "She was laughing at me," Papini told her husband. "No one believes you. Everyone thinks you ran away. No one believes you." Papini said she was reminded just why she was kidnapped in the first place, to be sold, presumably as a sex slave. "Guess what?" the woman told Papini. "The buyer's a cop. They're never going to find you." She said the day before her release, she heard captors arguing, followed by a gunshot. The older one never reappeared. Okay. Is she alleged? Wow, if she made this all up, she's kind of creative. She's saying there was an argument with a gunshot and she never saw the older captor again. So is she alleging here that the younger woman killed the older woman? The next day, the younger one forced her into a car before dropping her off along the road in Yolo County. Okay, so was this kind of, what does this mean? So is she alleging, like, if this is all fabricated, she's alleging she's making up a story that they had an argument and then the younger one just abandoned her because she didn't want to go through with the cop. Like, what caused the argument? I mean, I wonder how far she thought this through. Is she alleging that the cop backed out of the deal and then they had an argument or whatever? The details she provided about her captor's appearances were among the only ones released at a Reading news conference a few days after her return. Remember that she was held against her will and was isolated. Then Sheriff Tom Bosenko told the gaggle of reporters. There's still a lot of unknowns about her assailants. However, we commend Sherri for her efforts to sit down with our detectives to provide a statement. Bosenko urged anyone with info to contact authorities, and Captain Brian Jackson of the Shasta County Sheriff's Office said it didn't take long for detectives to start fielding calls from tipsters wanting to report suspicious Latinas. Jackson gave an example of what their calls were like. "I was at Walmart and there were two Hispanic ladies. One was younger, one was older, and they were whispering and they're looking at me, and I got blonde hair." A couple of days after Bosenko's news conference, Keith Papini gave his only statements to reporters since his wife's return, first in writing, then in an interview with ABC's 2020. He lashed out at those who didn't believe her. By that point, online doubters were beginning to express skepticism about her story. "Rumors, assumptions, lies, and hate have been both exhausting and disgusting," he said in a written statement. "Those people should be ashamed of their malicious, subhuman behavior. We are not going to allow these people to take away our spirit, love, or rejoice in our girl being found alive and home where she belongs. I understand people want the story, pictures, proof that this was not some sort of hoax planned to gain money or some fabricated race war. I do not see a purpose in addressing each preposterous lie." I mean, I have to say this, though. If it's all fake and she made it all up, you have to admire the dedication. I mean, she really beat herself up for this. Broken nose, branded, possibly permanent scar from that. In his emotional TV interview on 2020, he described feeling the scabs on her branded shoulder. He recounted how she screamed herself raw trying to get help the night her abductors let her free. She was coughing up blood from the screaming, Keith Papini said, trying to get somebody to stop. Was that confirmed? Wow, that's crazy. He had no doubts. "I knew she was taken," he told ABC at the time. Detectives turn to cell tower clues. While Sherri Papini struggled to provide meaningful info about her captors, investigators turned to cell records for clues. Around the time Keith Papini was talking to 2020 detectives were asking a Shasta County judge to sign off on a search warrant. They had already obtained warrants that pulled reams of cell phone tracking data from cellular towers near where Papini had disappeared and from where she was found along the highway. They sent the data to the FBI Cellular Analysis Survey Team, which performed a data run on the numbers looking for cell phones that had pinged towers at both locations. 6 numbers came back. The warrant allowed them to search the records associated with each number, including pictures and text message and billing info, without the knowledge of the phone's owners. The hope was that Papini's abductors had their cell phones on and that the detectives could use the info to track them down. One of the numbers belonged to Sarah Steiger, who was 21 and had dark hair like Papini's abductors, though she isn't Latina. She lived in Redding at the time. The morning Papini reappeared, Steiger was on her way to the Sacramento airport to visit her family for Thanksgiving. Then she returned from her trip. 2 detectives knocked on her door. It was after 9 p.m. and Steiger had no idea why these 2 men wearing plain clothes were standing in the dark outside her home. That's kind of creepy. They started out asking me questions like who else lived in my house. She told the Bee recently in a phone interview from Arkansas where she now lives. And they actually kind of were trying to come in and look around in my house, but I was like, oh, I'm not very comfortable with that. So I kind of kept them on the outside of the door. She said they began asking her questions about what she was doing on the morning Papini showed back up. Eventually, before they left, they told her that her cell phone had pinged a cell tower and that they were questioning her about the Papini case. Looking back, she said, I probably shouldn't have answered those questions because they didn't tell me who they were, you know? Later, Later, I was talking to my roommate and she's like, how do you know that they were actually really cops? And I was like, I don't know. The experience left her rattled. She was afraid to sleep alone in her house that night. She had a friend come over to stay with her out of fear that the men who'd been asking her questions would come back. It left me definitely fearful, you know? I mean, we're going to get into further activity with the po-po in that area because there's some really shady allegations. Papini, Trump, and Latinos. They're bringing Donald Trump into this. Wow. 8 days after Papini turned up, about 200 people gathered in Redding, 130 miles north of where she was found, to pose for a welcome home photograph. The picture was to be presented to Papini as a surprise gift. They stood in a grassy area not far from Redding's landmark Sundial Bridge and waved as a drone flew overhead to capture the photo. Older couples, families with children, cyclists, and dozens of people accompanied by dogs mingled together, many of them wearing pink, Papini's favorite color. They wore pink shirts, sneakers, jackets, and scarves. One woman rode a pink bicycle. Many reacted with disgust to suggestions that were emerging online that the case might be some sort of hoax. It's sick, Lisa Jeter, who helped organize the event, told a Bee reporter who traveled from Sacramento that day. I mean, she's the sweetest, most warm-hearted person you would ever meet. And for people to be that negative, that cruel, is disheartening and very, very sad. You know, from all these testimonies, too, do people actually think this was malicious? Because what are the options here? I mean, yes, it could have all been malicious. She could have set it all up and lied about everything. Or if she had some kind of psychotic break or split personality disorder, did she not even know what she did? Or, third of all, it's real. Missy MacArthur, the former Reading mayor, also attended the rally and had similar thoughts. They're just trolls, she said. Forget them, they're just out of it. Papini's story of being abducted by 2 Latinas sold well in Shasta County for other reasons. Said Alan Ernesto Phillips, an advocate for Shasta County's small Latino population. Papini went missing just days before Donald Trump was elected president. His stories of Mexican immigrants being rapists and criminals resonated in Shasta County, whose population of 182,139 people is only 10% Latino. Trump secured 2/3 of the vote in the 2016 election. I believe that Trump, his fellows, and his followers surprisingly quickly gave license to be able to say Mexicans are coming over the border and they're going to rape our women. They're going to bring in drugs. They're going to take away our jobs, Phillips said. You know, it's kind of funny. Obviously, that's not actually what Trump said. There was a clear delineation there between the criminals and the immigrants, but obviously, you know, the race baiters and the goofs, they like to pretend and fixate. And again, I'm not advocating anybody vote for Trump. I don't advocate any kind of oppressors or rulers or any kind of slavery of any kind or stealing money from people, whether you call it taxes or not. So, yeah, I'm not advocating to the violent religious cult of statism in any way, because I know the goofs are going to jump on that. But clearly, you know, I'm just about accuracy and logic, but obviously none of that here. Phillips said some Latinas in the community were already uncomfortable because of the political climate, went subterranean. Latinas were advised not to go out in pairs, he said. If they could, Phillips said, they avoided driving dark-colored SUVs like the one Papini claimed her abductors drove. They wouldn't go out in public around white people, he said, unless they had a witness. Yeah, is anybody buying this? I mean, this Phillips guy just seems like just a classic race-baiting goof. Doubts about Papini's story percolate online. Papini's story wasn't embraced by everyone in Shasta County. Tim Scarborough, who's lived in Shasta since the 1970s, was one of Papini's most outspoken skeptics. He was worried the weeks Papini went missing and for a few days after she returned. At the time, I had 2 teenage daughters, both blonde, Scarborough told the Bee recently. I was fearful for my daughters and fearful for women in the community. But after a few weeks, and as new details emerged, her story didn't sit right with Scarborough, who at the time worked for a local website hosting company. For one, experts were telling reporters in interviews that it's incredibly rare for women to kidnap each other. Well, it's incredibly rare to be kidnapped and killed by a serial killer as well. I mean, it's not like it doesn't happen just because it's rare. They also noted that sex trafficking victims, including children, were almost always known to the people exploiting them. Abductions of adult white women for the sex trade are exceedingly rare in the U.S. Well, see, what does exceedingly rare mean? What delineates rare from not rare? Because as I did a podcast on Amy Bradley, where a lot of the Dunning-Kruger crowd really loves to kind of shut down any idea, any kind of conversation or ideas that she was kidnapped for whatever reason. In any, not necessarily as a sex slave, but for any purpose, she was kidnapped. I actually put together a montage of actual photos on an escort website company that Bradley also appeared on of all of these women. Not all of them were white, but most of them were white, or more than half of them from Europe or the U.S., and they look identical. So all these clueless goofs saying that it doesn't happen, clearly it happens. And I mean, I would say more than 0 is too much. I mean, I think any moral person would say that. So to just phrase it as exceedingly rare, I mean, any kind of, even kidnapping children, I mean, I wouldn't say that's, well, the amount of millions of children, like how many millions would you have to have? What is it? 800,000 go missing, and a certain percentage of those actually were taken by family members and not involved in any kind of actual trafficking. So if you're talking hundreds of thousands of children getting kidnapped for whatever reasons, obviously, whatever minuscule percentages by maybe child serial killers, most of them are probably for some kind of trafficking situations. Compared to the total amount of children there are, I mean, what do you, like, again, this kind of nonsense on calling something rare relative to what? And does that mean it didn't happen in this case? Come on now. I mean, can we have at least a little bit of logic here? Obviously not in the mainstream, but... Scarborough said he read reports online sleuths had dug up that appeared to show Papini as the author of a racist post. An essay posted on a now-defunct website called skinheadswithaz.com was signed by Sherri Grafe, Papini's maiden name. It included a photo of a woman who looked like Papini. The writer said that while growing up in Shasta, she got into 2 fights with Latinas. I used to come home in tears because I was getting suspended from school all the time for defending myself against the Latinos, the post read. The chief problem was that I was drug-free, white, and proud of my blood and heritage. I mean, is that that's racist? What? That's allegedly racist? What? How is that a racist post? I mean, this is in the Sacramento Bee, so I guess, we're not really looking at accuracy here, but... I mean, are they alleging she was lying and she was the one starting the fights? I mean, what are they alleging here? Because the post itself is not racist. She's talking about herself being drug-free, white, and proud of my blood and heritage. So, you can only be proud of your blood and heritage if you're a certain race and not another? Is that what goofs hallucinate racism is? How is being proud of yourself racist? It's kind of weird. How is defending yourself against anybody racist? I don't know. This stuff is so weird. Man, the Sacramento Bee does not look good in its race baiting here. Here's the thing, though. Let's do 2 things. Let's assume she's not racist. Let's say she did get into fights with Latinos. Maybe they wanted revenge for that. Whether she is or isn't racist. Let's say she is racist, whatever. Whether she is or she isn't. If she got into fights either in self-defense or not, would that make her a target if she was kind of known to get into fights? Again, regardless of whether she was on the initiating or defending. Wouldn't that increase the likelihood that some people would want to get back at her? I mean, come on, is logic gone completely out the window here? The essay portrays the writer as a fierce fighter who inflicted damage on one of the Latinas she fought. It took 3 full-size men to pull me off of her, the post read. I broke her nose and split her eyebrow. And again, without knowing how that fight started, because was she attacked first and then she retaliated? Without knowing that, like, you can't really draw any conclusions here. Detectives say they never learned if Papini wrote the post. Papini and her family members insist she didn't. I mean, they don't have the IP to trace that. In an interview with detectives, Papini said at one point she'd hire an attorney to try to have the post removed. That was not her, Papini's ex-husband David Dreyfus told The Bee in late November 2016. There was someone who made a malicious post that is entirely uncharacteristic of her, not her at all, with as a diverse of a friends group as she and I had, that's not her. No, but even if it was her, like, wouldn't that increase the chances that there'd be retaliation, whether she initiated or defended, if she actually beat up someone involved in a gang or whatever? I mean, who knows? Scarborough didn't buy it. In late 2016, he began writing a blog about the inconsistencies in her story, as well as rumors he'd heard that made him think she'd made up the kidnapping. One of his entries went viral, generating close to 50,000 page views, a huge number for such a small blog, which he has since taken down. Why did he take it down? Many of the emails and comments he received were supportive of it and urged him to keep digging, but he said about half of them, many of them from his neighbors in Shasta, chided him for refusing to believe her story like they did. And again, what's with all these goofs? They're either jumping to believe or disbelieve. Why choose a side? I mean, you see this with all of this goofery in the mainstream. It's like clueless goofs are addicted to picking a side. They cannot remain objective, logical, and neutral. It's just impossible for the vast majority of people for some reason. But again, that's why the MINDSHOCK podcast exists. I was being attacked, he said, because I questioned the story that just didn't add up. Papini's sister, Sheila Koister, was among those who took issue with Scarborough's blog. The info that you have written on your blog is false and is harmful to my family, she wrote in a comment. We are asking that you take your blog down because of your false and inaccurate information is causing harm to my family at this time of healing. Detectives uncover Papini's history of lying. Detectives also had their doubts from the beginning, but they kept them largely to themselves. And again, I don't know how likely this would be. Because why would a local cop want her kidnapped unless, actually, I don't know, if he saw her around town and he liked her, I suppose that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. And his fellow, and obviously cops don't investigate themselves, the guards don't, they don't investigate themselves. So, I don't know. We're going to get to that in a moment in relation to the Smith case. Nothing was ever making sense, Captain Jackson of the Shasta County Sheriff's Office, but obviously in the beginning stages, we take every report seriously. They had good reason to. Just a few months earlier, the Vallejo Police Department had admitted that detectives got it wrong when they announced that the 2015 kidnapping and sexual assault of Denise Huskins was a hoax. Her kidnapper, Matthew Muller, has since pled guilty. Huskins and her boyfriend, who Muller left tied up and drugged in their home when he abducted Huskins, have since sued the department. The case reportedly settled for $2.5 million. That's crazy. Wow, cops were that incompetent that they just flat out called it a hoax? That's insane. Like, why would they do that? I mean, were they just that lazy they didn't want to investigate? But the inconsistencies of Papini's story were piling up. Details she told detectives didn't make sense. For instance, Papini initially claimed her wrists were zip-tied behind her back when she was first put in the room, but she said she somehow got them in front of her and chewed off her bindings. Well, depending on how long her arms are and how they're zip-tied, you could scoot your arms under your legs. I mean, people do that with handcuffs all the time. You could just look up videos on Google, like, if she's that small, I don't know. I guess it would depend on her flexibility level and the zip ties. She mentioned being hit with a taser in her first interview, but it never came up again. Well, didn't she say it was a taser or drugging? She couldn't remember. She said she was she had memory loss from this traumatic. I mean, this is kind of weird. Details she shared about the branding changed after her initial interview. Initially, Papini claimed that she was branded as punishment for her first attempt at escaping when she pulled boards off the window of her room. She also stated that her abductors told her that her buyer wanted her branded. Those aren't mutually exclusive, though, because if the buyer wanted her branded, they didn't get around to it. Then when she tried to escape, they decided to punish her and brand her at that time. That's not mutually exclusive. Man, these cops don't seem too bright here. In subsequent interviews, she said the branding came later and as a punishment for something else. And again, with someone that went through this traumatic ordeal, if it's true, and she was deprived mostly of water and food and obviously just the trauma and the beatings, would she be expected to have perfect memory, especially if she was drugged with unknown substances all this time? Why would there be an expectation of flawless memory? Like, it's kind of weird. People who aren't drugged, starved, and beaten, they don't have perfect memory either. I mean, you know? She chalked up her memory problems about the branding incident to being in pain from the burn, as well as the weight of her body on her breast implants, the FBI wrote in their complaint. While Papini was missing, detectives and FBI agents also filed at least 15 search warrants for cell phone records and for data associated with Papini's social media accounts. The records revealed that before she vanished, Papini had been secretly exchanging messages with both Donovan Misk, the man from Michigan, and with another man whom detectives haven't identified. So they still haven't identified him to this day? She had their numbers hidden on her phone under women's names. One other piece of evidence cast doubt. In the summer of 2017, the Bee revealed that Papini's mother, in 2003, called deputies to ask for help with her daughter. Papini, her mother alleged, had been harming herself and blaming the injuries on the mom. The report the Bee obtained was only 2 sentences long. It didn't say whether the department found evidence that Papini, then 21, had in fact harmed herself. So they don't know it could have been true? How is that evidence of lying? Jackson said detectives were aware of the report and talked to Papini about it. He said it was another red flag similar to the Skinheads blog, but not enough evidence to publicly disavow her claims. This is not very good evidence that she's lying. I mean, this is like the worst evidence I've ever heard presented of that somebody might be lying. Not that she's not lying, but this is not evidence. At the same time, detectives interviewed told them Papini had a long history of narcissistic behavior and lying. Okay, even so do a lot of people that never make up kidnapping stories. Papini's former youth counselor, who investigators didn't name, told them while she was still missing that Papini, quote, was good at creating different realities for people so that they would see what she wanted them to see, which got her really good attention, end quote, according to the FBI's complaint. And you know what's weird? We're going to get into this later. If there is some kind of police cover-up here and they're trying to make her look bad, who's to say that former youth counselor isn't buddy-buddy with the cops or was paid off? Her ex-husband, Dreyfus, who was in the military, told detectives when they got married only because she needed his health insurance due to complications related to regular egg donations. According to the FBI's complaint, he couldn't be reached for comment for this story. And again, is that just an ex-husband, a mad ex-husband who's making stuff up? I mean, was that actually verified that she did egg donations? Like several others they interviewed, Dreyfus told them Papini claimed she'd been abused by her family growing up. He told detectives that after they divorced in 2007, several mutual friends told him she was a habitual liar. And here's the thing, too, like, just because someone thinks someone is a habitual liar doesn't mean they are. Because, you know, as people gossip, someone might say what someone said was a lie when it actually wasn't a lie. Like, so do we have any actual definitive examples? Because so far there are zero. Like, is there definitively proven examples of her lying? And about what? And how serious? Shahan Davari, one of Papini's ex-boyfriends from the early 2000s, wasn't among those contacted by authorities, but he told the Bee he would have said much the same thing about Papini. That's just the way that her MO is. Lie, cheat, steal, bat her eyelashes, he said. It's weird to call her a con artist because I don't know that her goal is to get money out of somebody, but she doesn't have the ability to be truthful. Okay, so pretty substantial hit piece. So if these people aren't lying, so let's say they're not lying, is there a magic Dungeons and Dragons spell that protects habitual liars from being kidnapped or killed in any way or being met with foul play? I mean, this is the level of goofery we have to deal with in the so-called true crime community. Because so many goofs think that just because someone lies about a lot of things, that somehow means they magically, whatever particular story can't be true in another instance. I mean, even in The Boy That Cried Wolf, I mean, has nobody read that story? Even if somebody lies all the time, that doesn't mean they're incapable of telling the truth. Or if it really is some kind of massive hit piece, I mean, we're going to get to why that would be in a moment. And if she's always lying about everything and getting into fights with people, would that paint a bigger target on her back? Like what, you know? And also, does she have a history of hurting herself? Because that is relevant. Because how many people that fake kidnappings go through this level of dedication to beat the crap out of themselves? DNA hit breaks open Papini investigation. Nearly a year after she first went missing, the sheriff's office released the first sketches of the two masked women based on descriptions Papini had provided to a sketch artist. Detectives also released the first new info about the case in months. Some of it seemed to cast doubt on the story. For instance, Papini told detectives she cut her foot in the fight with one woman in the bathroom, but investigators didn't find evidence of the cut. Jackson told the Bee at the time that it wasn't necessarily a sign that Papini was making up part of the story or any other parts of her account. Well, how deep was the cut? I mean, if it was a very small cut, why would there be evidence of that weeks after the fact? Obviously, in any investigation, especially something of this nature where there's trauma and it's a prolonged thing, Jackson told the Bee in 2017, it's not abnormal to have inconsistencies. But behind the scenes, Jackson was becoming frustrated. I would have days where it was like, this is our waste of our time, he later told the Bee. But we have an obligation to investigate this because what if, it's true? Then we have a serious problem. Though it didn't seem so at the time, Jackson dropped a bombshell in that 2017 news release. The last ones detective would send about the case for the next 4 years. He told reporters that a forensic exam found male DNA on Papini's clothes that didn't belong to her husband. He didn't reveal at the time that the male DNA was found in her underwear. In the interview with the Bee after her arrest, Jackson said that doesn't necessarily mean Papini had sex. The DNA could have ended up on her clothing merely through close association. A medical exam after her reappearance didn't find any evidence she'd recently had sex. Nevertheless, the DNA would prove to be the decisive piece of evidence. In March 2020, a DNA hit from a family tree database led them to the mother of James Reyes, her ex-boyfriend. If we didn't have that, where would we be today, Jackson said. We wouldn't be here. And the quote-unquote cold case or whatever would be quote-unquote sitting on the shelf. FBI agents went to the Reyes home on June 9th, 2020 and collected items from his trash, including a Honest Honey green tea bottle. The DNA on it matched what was on Papini's underwear. That garbage collection is essentially the same technique investigators used to confirm the identities of the Golden State Killer Joseph James D'Angelo and NorCal rapist Roy Charles Waller. A few weeks later, FBI agents and a Shasta County Sheriff's detective confronted Reyes at his apartment. He quickly began to tell the story that unraveled all of Papini's lies. See, before we get to this, I just want to point this out. If this was all real, and they're trying to make it look like she set it all up for whatever reason. We're actually going to get to the reason. We're going to get to the reason soon. I know it's been a while. I want to finish this article and we'll get to the biggest mind shock yet in the Smith case. But they can't really tell exactly when the DNA was left there, right? So could she have met up with the boyfriend, or if she has a split personality, whatever, could he have visited her while he was abducted? If he was in on the abduction with the other two women, is it possible he wanted her to go down for this alone, which is why he made that up? But again, whatever reason, she could have had contact with him, and it could still be true, obviously. But let's finish this article. And again, brain fingerprint scan is the way to go, both on her and the boyfriend and all the cops. Ex-boyfriend's account of Papini's missing weeks. Reyes, who has not returned messages from the Bee seeking comment for this story, and Papini had been friends since they were in their early teens. So wait a second. So he possibly could have also known Tera Smith. Huh. At one point they became engaged, but it didn't work out. He was cleaning his house in 2015 and came across a box of old photos and some of Papini's stuff that he had held onto. He sent the items to Papini's parents. Not long after, she called him at work. She said she wanted to run away with him and that she'd been saving cash to do it. Papini told him that her husband was beating and raping her and she was trying to escape. She kind of laid out the situation. He told the investigators about the initial call. Afterwards, they bought prepaid phones to communicate with each other. She shipped him a package that included a note detailing the spot where she wanted him to pick her up. He got a friend to rent him a car, and he drove up from Orange County. He waited at a Reading Starbucks for her to text him. When she did, he pulled up to where she was jogging, and she climbed in the back seat and laid down. She slept most of the way back down to Costa Mesa, he told the investigators. And again, is there anything to confirm this? Do they have any of the toll cameras of this vehicle with him, at least to confirm his movements. He's claiming that she was in the back seat and laid down. That's kind of convenient. So was she not seen by any cameras? I mean, maybe she was. If they have the evidence, they need to present this evidence. Once there, he bought her some sweats, socks, and t-shirts to wear since she'd only been wearing sweaty running clothes. He worked during the days, and as far as he knew, she never left the house. They talked and ate together, but otherwise, Papini rarely left her room. She was just feeling for herself, Reyes told the investigators about what Papini did for most of those 3 weeks. She was in her own thing. At her request, he said he covered up the window in her room with boards. The room, FBI agent said, matched the description of the one Papini said her captors kept her in, including the closet where she said they'd kept her chained. There was no sign of a chain, however, because obviously he would leave it there if that was true. As the weeks went by, Reyes said Papini started missing her kids, and she told him she wanted to go home. She ate little in an apparent effort to lose weight. She chopped off her hair. She started hitting and burning herself, but she needed help for her other injuries. She told him to bank a puck off my leg, so I shot a puck off her leg lightly, he told investigators. Reyes held up a hockey stick, and she rammed her nose into it, said Jackson, the Shasta County Sheriff's captain. Wow. Then she asked him to go to Hobby Lobby and buy a wood-burning tool. She pulled her shirt up, and as the tool glowed red-hot and with shaking hands, Reyes attempted to brand the message that Papini wanted written. He told the investigators he couldn't remember what exactly it was she wanted him to sear onto her skin, but he clearly remembered that she never complained about the pain. Are we really believing this guy? I mean, why would anybody trust a guy that would actually do this? Then, right before Thanksgiving, she told him, I'm ready to go. He got his friend to rent him a car, and they drove without stopping to Yolo County. He dropped her off on a frontage road beside an orchard. He drove back to Orange County and had dinner that night with his aunt. I haven't talked to her since, he told the investigators. Were any women involved in her captivity, they asked. Yeah, no, he told them. I don't know any Mexican girls. Reyes told investigators he wasn't the only one who knew Papini was with him. His cousin's wife, and the cousin's mother also knew she was at his apartment. Reyes' cousin even spotted her once while she was standing in the window and once when he briefly went inside. She retreated from his view both times. Reyes' family members' names weren't provided in the FBI report, which noted they never made any effort to speak to police about Papini until after Reyes had the investigators show up at his apartment. 3 days later, FBI agents confronted Papini. Despite telling her multiple times that it's a crime to lie to the FBI, she stuck with her story with one exception. When her husband Keith left the room, she admitted she had been speaking to other men. When I went out of town for work, I talked with other guys, she said. I made a mistake, and I talked to other men, and I shouldn't have. With this small admission, Sherri Papini went home. FBI agents and detectives continued to investigate for another year, building a case not against would-be abductors, but the person they now believed was truly responsible. In early March 2022, 5 years and 3 months after she reemerged with a fantastic tale of abduction, agents knew there was only one thing left to do. Okay, hold on a second. So, is it possible she saw... So first of all, does anybody think Reyes is weird for this? So they're not even really involved with each other. She's just hanging out in a room that she asked him to board up. She's asking him to beat her up, and he just goes along with this? Apparently they're not even, sexually involved or anything. So what kind of a guy would do this? Does anybody think Reyes is weird? And, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying his story, but if... Wow. Is it possible... Okay, is it possible everything is true? Is it possible she has some kind of split personality? Is it also possible that he was maybe... Is it possible that his cousin's wife and his cousin's mother... Is it possible they actually went into the room at certain times? And in whatever mental state that Papini was in, she thought that they were her captors? Or maybe they really were without the knowledge of Reyes? Maybe they found out Reyes was keeping... her there for whatever reason, of her own will or not. And they came up with this scheme. And if she does have a genuine mental condition, things got mixed up, and she didn't want to betray Reyes, so she didn't mention him. I mean, there's just something's not right about all of this, and for people to just think that she just lied and that's the end of it, they don't find Ray's weird or any of this other stuff weird. I mean, Ray's is admitting, he's flat out admitting that his cousin's wife and the cousin's mother knew she was at the apartment. So he admits that two females, a younger female and an older female, know that she's there. And what else is he not saying? I mean, I really don't understand how people could just take anybody's word on face value about anything. Again, this is MINDSHOCK. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. I'm not claiming she's lying or not lying. But there seems to be a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different types of scenarios that could account for all of this. Sherri Papini's children, aged 7 and 9, were at piano practice with their mom in Reading on a morning in early March. Just then, a man came inside and told Papini her car had been hit. He was really an FBI agent. Yeah, that is really shady. Another was waiting outside to place her in handcuffs. When they went to grab her, she screamed no. She tried to run. She threw her cell phone 20 feet. After they put her in cuffs, they would drive her down the same freeway past where James Reyes, her ex-boyfriend, dropped her off to the Sacramento County, Maine jail, which serves as the holding cell for local prisoners accused of federal crimes. She'd spend the next 5 nights there. Papini's family remained very much in her corner on the day of her arrest. A family hired a Utah public relations firm to issue a statement that night. The firm's founder, Chris Thomas, handled media relations for the family of Elizabeth Smart, whose kidnapping at age 14 also became a tabloid sensation. The statement read, "We love Sherri and are appalled by the way in which law enforcement ambushed her this afternoon in a dramatic and unnecessary manner in front of her children. If requested, Sherri would have fully complied and come to the police station as she has done multiple times before, where this could have been handled in a more appropriate way. Sherri and Keith have cooperated with law enforcement's request despite repeated attempts to unnecessarily pit them against each other, empty threats to publicly embarrass them, and other conduct that was less than professional. We are confused by several aspects of the charges and hope to get clarification in the coming days." Papini's family declined to be interviewed for this story, said Linda Lucetti, who's fielding media inquiries for the family on behalf of Thomas's firm. Would Papini disappear again? A judge weighs in. In Sherri Papini's first court hearing the day after her arrest, her then attorney, Michael Borges of Reading, asked that she be released immediately. He told the judge he was concerned about the conditions in the jail where Papini was being held in isolation as part of the facility's routine 14-day COVID-19 quarantine protocols. Borges said Papini has food allergies and has only been able to eat part of an apple since her arrest. U.S. Magistrate Judge Jeremy D. Peterson continued the matter of whether to release her on bond until after the weekend. At the next hearing, prosecutors said her behavior at her kid's piano studio showed that she was a flight risk. They also noted that Papini had already proven she couldn't be trusted. This defendant ran and successfully hid from law enforcement for 3 weeks, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Veronica Allegria. Borges argued that she was merely startled at the piano recital and has been trying to run toward her children. And again, can we really even trust the statements of law enforcement? Because everything's kind of he said, she said. I mean, release the video of the arrest if there was one. She's not a danger to the safety of anyone, Borges said. Citing her lack of criminal history, a federal judge agreed to set her free on a $120,000 bond. She was required to surrender her passport and her husband's firearms. See, that's sketchy. Why would she be... That's really sketchy, because let's say somebody breaks in... Like, let's say she was being framed or something, or whatever, or maybe she has enemies. She has children in the home. But even if she didn't, like, she hasn't been convicted in court yet, so she's not allowed to defend herself? So if people break into the house, they don't have weapons, they get shot and killed, who's that on? I mean, this is insane. And if they're that much of a criminal, they could have unregistered firearms as well. So what does surrendering the registered ones do? I mean, you know... Obviously something not that the Dunning-Kruger crowd never considers. She was ordered to limit her travel, abstain from drugs and alcohol, not commit any crimes, and undergo psychiatric treatment. Ordered to not commit any crimes. By the way, don't commit any crimes, as if that's not always the standard. After the hearing, like she could have been allowed to otherwise, but in this case she's not. After the hearing, around 24 reporters and a handful of friends and family members waited for Papini to come through the jail's main lobby doors and onto the street. She ran when she saw the TV cameras. Her sweatshirt was pulled up over her head. She was sobbing. Reporters chased her down the street. See, that's just scummy behavior. I mean, it's one thing to, be outside the court and document something. But when someone is clearly sobbing and distressed and you continue hounding them, that's insane. And it's not like it's a convicted, like, see, if it was a previously convicted serial, someone who's definitively committed crimes. I mean, this is a mother with children. There's no reason for that. After the hearing, and she's not even accused of killing anybody or, or hurting anybody else. Reporters chased her down the street yelling questions. Her friend and family members tried to shield her with their bodies before they sped away in a car. Keith Papini wasn't among them. The price of Papini's ruse. Keith Papini isn't facing any charges in the case. Neither is Reyes, the ex-boyfriend with whom she stayed those 22 days. Hold on a second. How are they not charging? He admitted to beating her up. I mean, if somebody asks you to assault them, I mean, obviously it's dicey territory if they're an adult, but if she has a mental health condition, it doesn't matter if you ask somebody to assault you. They still assaulted you. And again, I mean, if she's, she's 5'3", 100 pounds, and he's beating the crap out of her and branding her, and he's not charged with anything? I mean, I guess it's for his cooperation, but wow. Okay. Why are they trusting him, though? I still don't get it. Like, they don't think anything is weird about a guy who's just, she's just staying in this tiny room and he's beating her up, and at her request or not. How do they know that's true? Instead, prosecutors said Papini bears sole responsibility. Prosecutors initially charged Papini with 34 counts of mail fraud and 1 count of lying to the FBI. If convicted on all counts, she could have spent up to 25 years in prison and paid $500,000 in fines. You know what's crazy? I mean, there's scum out there who harm children that get off in like 5 years. And she's facing 25 years for lying. I mean, this is insane. I mean, really, it really highlights just the goofery within the so-called justice system. The mail fraud counts stemmed from Papini's receipt by mail of about 35 payments totaling $30,694.15 from the Victim Compensation Board, and her use of the mail to send $2,997 in victim funds she received to pay for a therapist for treatment for anxiety and PTSD for her purported kidnapping, court records say. In mid-April, though, she agreed to plead guilty to 2 of the counts in hopes of getting a lighter sentence. I'm still puzzled on how they know Reyes... Like, how do they know Reyes didn't set this whole thing up? And he wanted to hold her for ransom, then changed his mind or whatever. I mean, this is just weird. Because if she really did text him and she wanted to run away with him, he could have thought, oh, this is his opportunity to do something. Like, how do they really know this wasn't mostly his idea? The day she entered her plea, Papini appeared before Senior U.S. District Judge William B. Shub via Zoom. She wiped her nose and struggled not to cry as she sat in her lawyer's office in Sacramento. How do you feel today? The judge asked as he began inquiring about whether she was mentally fit to enter her plea. I'm sorry, Your Honor, Papini answered. I'm sad. I feel really sad, Your Honor. I feel very sad. Were you kidnapped? He asked. No, Your Honor. Did you lie to government agents when you told them you were kidnapped? Yes, Your Honor. See, the other thing, if she really does have a mental health condition, was she coerced into saying this didn't happen? Like, did they take advantage of her? And if she really does have some kind of severe mental health condition, does she easily believe what other people tell her? So did she believe that they convinced her that she lied? Did she believe that? Even if she didn't lie. The turmoil wreaked on Papini's family. Sitting inside the sheriff's office in Reading 2 days later, Captain Jackson had to say, when asked about Keith Papini learning the truth, that his wife had been lying to him for years. Everybody has a choice of what they want to forgive, and if that's his choice, then God bless him. Jackson didn't know that Keith Papini had already filed for divorce. And you know what's really tragic? If it turns out that she really was kidnapped. It was a dramatic about-face for the loyal husband who had defended his wife so vigorously when she returned home and who sat by her side through all those interviews as she lied to detectives. In his divorce filing, Keith Papini said his days of doing interviews with reporters are done for now. He's not going to do any more of them. He described it a living hell for him and his 2 children that kept life in turmoil for 5.5 years. For a substantial time, we received anonymous messages, hate mail, and even death threats, he wrote in his divorce filing. And I would also be curious to know what his intuition tells him. Because I know, like, when the FBI is giving you documentation, she admits it, etc., etc. But I would still put stock in his intuition, especially initially, when she first came back by whatever means. I would be curious about that. Because did he just allow himself to be convinced by external forces? The children have now learned that their mother lied to them about her disappearance, lied to them about how she was abused by 2 Hispanic women, and lied to them about her arrest, he wrote. The fact that their mother lied to them on such a major issue is something they and I are having a hard time dealing with. He argued he should get sole custody of the couple's children, who hadn't seen their mother in weeks. His filing said she'd been staying with a relative in Chico, though he didn't say whom. Reading, a community left with anger and sadness. Missy McArthur, the former Reading mayor, says she feels for Keith Papini and especially their kids. The Papini name is forever tainted in Shasta County. I'm not of the opinion she should go to jail for years and years because that just hurts her kids, she said. And, they're still kids. But the victims extend well beyond family. There were the half a dozen people, included Sarah Steiger, the young woman who received the frightening nighttime visit from the 2 deputies. They had their phone. Yeah, but see, that's on the police because those deputies could have done that in daytime. They could have had, 1 or 2 female officers with them. They could have made that totally comfortable. That's totally on law enforcement. They had their phone records searched, their privacy violated without their knowledge, all because of Papini's lies. That's a lot of energy to put into something that's fake, Steiger said. That's terrible. There was Donovan Misk, the Michigan man who had the cops showed up his work. He said the terrifying ordeal nearly cost him his client. I believe it was the first or second day of me working with this. And that's on law enforcement. They could have showed up. Why'd they show up at his workplace? They could have showed up at his home. So it made me look like a real bad person to work with, and I was just starting my company. There were the hundreds of people in the small Latino community in Shasta County. They weren't safe. They won't say they were fearful or frightened, but they were afraid, said Alan Ernesto Phillips, the local Latino advocate. They were taking precautions to protect themselves and their families. And that's the sad part, said Jackson, the sheriff's captain. This incident instilled that fear in people, and it didn't need to happen. Luz Maria Galvana, who works at the Reading Mexican restaurant, felt like a target after Papini returned. It felt kind of in a way racist, she said. Her story didn't add up. I just never believed her story, lie after lie. And again, if it turns out to be true, are any of these people going to be issuing apologies? I don't know if I'm going to hold my breath for that. I'm not even going to go over the rest of this article. I mean, it's just kind of mostly nonsense. All right, so let's get into the biggest mind shock in the Tera Smith case that possibly is connected to the Papini case as well. There's actually one more thing. There's a comment on Unresolved Mysteries on the case. I wonder if her Orange County boyfriend was watching the news for the time that she was kidnapped, saw the news story, and decided to say nothing, or if he knew all along she was going to doctor this whole scam up, in which case he should be charged and fined heavily too. Let those 2 nitwits pay for everyone's time and resources expended on her search. And yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. Yeah, I don't get it. I really don't get why everybody gives this guy a pass. Because how did people know he's not the true mastermind behind all of it? All right, so let's get to the major mind shocks here. Actually, I lied. I want to go over one more article before we get to the biggest mind shock here. This is on nowtolove.co.nz, so this is New Zealand. A mysterious coincidence. Sherri Papini's school friend also vanishes in the same area. And again, just the likeness. I mean, these 2 girls really could pass for sisters. As this article starts, Sherri Papini and Tera Lynn Smith could have passed for sisters. When Tera went missing August 22nd, 98, the whole town of Redding, California, including Mrs. Papini, then known as Sherri Grafe, and her now husband Keith wondered what happened to her. For 18 years, the case had been cold until Sherri went missing on the same road on November 2nd this year. The Northern Californian community couldn't help but make chilling comparisons. But unlike Sherri, who was released by her captors on Thanksgiving morning, 3 weeks after she went missing, Tera was never found. Also, that Thanksgiving morning, I mean, that's an interesting date. This article is from December 8th, 2016, by the way. Prior to his wife's release, Keith Papini, who along with his wife Sherri was in the year above Tera at Central Valley High, reached out to Tera's father, Terry Smith. The desperate husband raised the possibility that the person who had taken Mr. Smith's pretty blonde-haired, blue-eyed, slim-built girl had come back and taken his wife. The prime suspect in Tera's disappearance was her martial arts instructor, Troy Zink. Zink, then a 29-year-old married father of 1, was the last person to see Tera alive, allegedly. Zink told police that the 2 had fought near her family's Reading home on the evening she went missing. He claimed, and again, he's admitting to an argument with a person. I mean, this is kind of weird. Like, you would think if he was truly guilty, he wouldn't have done that unless, of course, I don't know. Maybe he knows the cops in the area, which we'll get to in a moment. He claimed to have dropped her off at an intersection while he continued to drive to a secluded spot to pray before returning to his home at 11:30 that night. Despite being the prime suspect, Mr. Zink, now 48, was never charged due to lack of evidence. While authorities do not seem to think there's a connection between the two cases, they can see how the community might be drawn into speculation. Sherri is 34 years old, but looks much younger. Shasta County Sheriff Tom Bosenko told reporters earlier this month when asked about a possible link between the cases. Bosenko has over 30 years of experience in the area, also added they could probably pass for sisters. I mean, this is just, they're both blondes who look identical, jogging on the same road, disappear. I mean, this is insane. And it's about to get a whole lot crazier. All right, so let's go back to the Web Sleuths forum on Tera Smith. So there's going to be some conflicting statements here, but a poster here, January 1st, 2017, regarding Zink and Tera Smith. There isn't anyone who lives here that doesn't think he is responsible, including law enforcement. My father was law enforcement at the time, and they said they knew he did it. But there was absolutely nothing at all to tie him to it. Well, then how did they know? There are so many mines, hills, and valleys around here, so many places to stash a body. It's horrific to think what her family has suffered and to know that there's a good chance they will never be able to lay her to rest. I don't know how he lives with himself, let alone still lives here. It's not like we don't know what he did. A follow-up post here by Roadrunner. They found Aaron Corwin in a mine by sending cameras down. Seems like a cold case rework might be circumstantial enough to convict him. I had not heard her story until the story about SP, and it's still clearly obviously he did it to us strangers. What about her scent not being where he said he dropped her off? I feel some very hardcore investigators could crack this guy and get this solved. What can we do to try to push her case further along? I'm going to guess there's probably about a 75% chance she's in an old gold mine. I've never been to that area. Are there really that many mines? Like hundreds and hundreds of mines there, so it's like impossible to search every single one? Another post. As I mentioned before, my dad is retired law enforcement. He worked homicide, and while he didn't catch this case, it's a small enough department. Everyone was involved, whether it was looking for her, discussing the case, running down leads, etc. We talked about this about 6 or 7 years ago, and he told me there was never any doubt in any of their minds that Zink murdered her. There just wasn't a shred of evidence to prove it. Short of planting evidence at the time, there was nothing that could be done. I remember telling him that day I could understand why someone would want to do that, especially when you know someone is about to get away with murder. He scolded me and told me it is against the oath they take, and no decent detective would do such a thing. Well, unfortunately, there's plenty of non-decent detectives out there. Of course, I completely agree. I have little regard for police officers who do that, but on a case like Tera's, I completely understand why someone would. See, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that. As long as you know with 100% certainty. So they're saying they knew, but did they really know, though? Like, let's say a piece of evidence was obtained illegally. Like a piece of real evidence that proved that he killed her. But it was illegal, so they can't use it in trial, so they can plant something else. I don't know if I would necessarily have a problem with that as long as the evidence was legitimate. Because if there's some kind of paperwork issue, that's different. You know, investigators can do what they need to do to get the guy that's 100% guilty. But the problem is, if they don't actually have any real evidence and it's just their opinion that he's guilty. Because what if he didn't even act alone? I mean, it's just, yeah, it's tough. Okay, so here's probably our final point on this and the most mind-shocking. A poster posted this October 14th, 2018 on the Web Sleuths. Does anyone know the name of the RPD officer who reportedly stayed on the case full-time even after the FBI and Sheriff's Office stepped in? Also, did anyone ever look at the officers on duty that evening, particularly in the East Reading area? The intersection of Old Alturas and Old Oregon roads were a hot spot at the time where other karate instructors felt safe to take their underage students. They didn't worry about being caught there. In fact, they felt safe doing pretty much whatever they wanted in their vehicles while parked just off the road. And I know firsthand that Tera's case was used to threaten other girls who came after her. The instructors who I knew were very close to both RPD and the DA's office. At least 2 members of which admitted back in 2000 to knowing about their friends' relationships with minors but never reported anything. I thought it was interesting that a sex ring was mentioned in the Papini case because while that matter appears to be a total hoax, there absolutely was a non-exclusive group of karate instructors who preyed on their underage students during and around the time Tera disappeared, and it appeared to be somewhat of an open secret among those involved as well as their law enforcement friends. I am terribly disheartened and yet not at all surprised by what appears to be law enforcement's suppression of evidence and or stonewalling, at least with regard to inspecting Zink's truck and releasing info regarding the nature of his relationship with Tera, which was pretty much undeniable from the start. My sincere hope is that her family have managed to find peace despite so many unknowns. Okay, so is that opening Pandora's box here? Because if Zink knew that other RPD officers and other karate instructors were having these relationships and they all looked the other way, were they afraid that if they truly went after Zink, he would blow the whistle on them? And is that also why he felt safe staying in town? Because, I mean, yeah, this is all really crazy. And I am going to unveil the McGuire theory, which, again, I am not alleging it is true in any way. In any way. I am not alleging it is true. This is just something I couldn't help but consider, because if Papini was also... Did she also take karate classes? And was she traumatized or abused by a police officer? Did that cause a split personality? Did that factor into her alleged kidnapping, whether real or not? Did it cause her to mentally spiral? And some of the details, like being sold to a police officer, is that just fragmented pieces of her psyche? Was she really abused? Maybe not her by her parents, but by these police officers and karate instructors. Because is this really an open secret and a hotspot? And was that Zink's threat to law enforcement by admitting to them that's the intersection that he took her to? Because that seems kind of like a random intersection for her to go jogging. And yet that's what he's made in his official statement. I mean, that's an open threat to law enforcement, is it not, that he would blow the whistle on them if they continued to go after him? What does that mean? And since they went after him for the gun charges and not Tera, was that kind of like, is that why he chose not to blow the whistle? I mean, it's kind of weird, but that's the McGuire theory there, is that it's all related. Because whatever traumatized Papini, if she was being abused by one of these older guys, either another karate instructor other than Zink, or maybe Zink himself. Is there any evidence that also who told the Smiths that Tera was even involved with Zink? Was it Papini? This person was never named as far as anything written online. I mean, yeah, the coincidence stack is so high here. I mean, this is one of the most mind-shocking ones. Do any locals know about this alleged open secret in this intersection of Alturas and Old Oregon Road? Because is that true or not? Because if it's not true, then okay, that's all out the window. But if it is true, and yeah, I mean, he also mentions a sex ring in the Papini case, even though it appears to be a total hoax. I mean, what are the allegations there, and what are connections to local law enforcement?